good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. My name is Julie Boga, and I'm the Program Manager for the African Fish and Aquaculture Welfare Program implemented by the One Health Development Initiative. Today's webinar is From Policy to Practice, Integrating Fish Welfare into Sustainable Aquaculture and Animal Welfare Frameworks. And I will start by introducing our panelists to you all. And our first panelist is Dr. Bernice McLean. And Dr. Bernice is a marine policy specialist with a strong interest in sustainable fisheries management and aquaculture development. She has worked with African Union Development Agency since 2016 and is currently leading the Blue Economy Unit in the Agriculture, Food Systems, and Environmental Sustainability Directorate. Her role includes providing technical support to AU member states, regional bodies, and other stakeholders in areas of blue economy development. This includes also developing and implementing key flagship initiatives with the aim of generating wealth, creating income, opportunities, and showcasing learning and innovation in key sectors. Our second panelist is Dr. Nazael Amos Madalla. He's the Director of Aquaculture at the Tanzanian Ministry of Livestock Fisheries, bringing over 2 decades of expertise in aquaculture, research, policy, and practice. He holds a PhD in Aquaculture Nutrition from the University of Stirling in the UK and has served as a senior lecturer and head of department at Sokoine University of Agriculture. His extensive research work focuses on developing sustainable aquaculture feeds, particularly through the innovative use of non-conventional local protein sources to replace fish meal, a key factor in improving both the sustainability and welfare of farmed fish. He has led and contributed to numerous national and international research projects, including initiatives on climate change, adaptation, feeding strategies, and value chain analysis. As a key policymaker, he's instrumental in bridging the gap between scientific research and national aquaculture development strategies. His practical experience and scholarly contribution, evidenced by over 40 publications, this make him a vital voice in discussions on integrating animal welfare principles into sustainable aquaculture frameworks to ensure the sector's growth is compliant with the global standards. Our third panelist is Dr. Ana Menezes. Ana is a national of Mozambique with a background in agriculture, aquaculture, and environmental sciences. She advocates for integration of an ecosystem approach to aquaculture, to small-scale and medium-scale commercial aquaculture, and improvement of relationships between different sectors of agriculture. For over 35 years, she has applied her vast knowledge in aquaculture and natural resource management to help eradicate food insecurity, improve nutrition, and reduce poverty, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. As an FAO Senior Fisheries Officer, Ana works with members to increase aquaculture production by using best practices that are both sustainable and profitable. Her later focus has been on capacity development and good governance frameworks for governments, financial institutions, and farmers. Ana has also worked as the National Officer for the United Nations Environmental Programme and served as National Director of Planning and Research for the Ministry of Environmental Affairs at the Instituto de Investigação Pesqueira in Mozambique. She was rewarded the UN FAO 100 Best Employees in 2019, received a 2021 Graduate of Distinction Award from SUNY-ESF, and the 2025 Spirit of Public Service Award by the Maxwell School, Syracuse University. And finally, our last panelist is Professor Sloans Chimatiro. He's a fisheries and aquaculture specialist with more than 30 years experience, holds a PhD in fisheries science. He was instrumental in the AU-NEPAD Fish for All Abuja Summit, which integrated fish in comprehensive Africa agriculture development program. In 2010, he led the first Conference of African Ministers of Fisheries and Aquaculture. Between 2006 and 2014, he was the head of fisheries at NEPAD agency, where, among others, he led the process of developing the African Union policy framework and reform strategy for fisheries and aquaculture, or the Common African Fisheries Policy. He is currently the president of the African Union Policy Research Network for Fisheries and Aquaculture. And before joining NEPAD agency in 2006, he was the director of fisheries in Malawi. Thank you so much and welcome our panelists to this session. Thank you. So today's session, as we said, focuses on understanding and integrating fish welfare into sustainable aquaculture and animal welfare frameworks. Let's meet our panelists. And please feel free to type any questions you may have in the Q&A. We'll make sure that our panelists respond to your questions, depending on the value of time that we may have. So we'll just quickly dive into meeting our panelists and basically trying to understand what success story they have to share in terms of the contribution they've made to aquaculture, and especially with regards to fish welfare and policies. Professor Sloans, you can start by telling us your story and an achievement you've done in ensuring policy integration in aquaculture and fisheries.
Yeah, thank you so much, Julie, and thanks to the participants, and thank you for inviting me to this panel. I think as you might have heard or listened to the introduction, I think my specialty really is policy development. And I think one of the highlights of what I've done is the development of the African Union Policy Framework and Reform Strategy for Fisheries and Aquaculture in Africa, which is, you might call it the Common African Fisheries Policy. And I think this is what is guiding the development of the sector on the continent, and basically to have this instrument put together. Of course, I mean, it's a teamwork, but I think facilitating the process, I think, was very important. As you heard in the introduction, this was done under the auspices of the CADAP. CADAP is the Continental Agriculture Policy. And so in there, we tried to ensure that for countries that have a substantial water resources and fisheries and aquaculture resources, they had to account for the contribution of these resources towards the agriculture development. But of course, I'll say that maybe during the details. But that's what I can say, that really that's the contribution the modest contribution I've made on the continental policy space. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Sloans. I would also like to invite Dr. Anna to also just take us through the key, one highlight, just highlight one key success or achievement in your career, and one that particularly relates to fisheries and aquaculture and fish welfare.
Thank you, Julie, and thank you everybody for joining us. That's wonderful to see this platform. Thank you for inviting me. Julie, very simple. My success story is the success story of a farmer. And every time a farmer writes to me a few years later and tells me, Anna, I have gone from the status of bankruptcy to the status of today putting 2,000 tons in the market or 200 tons in the market. That for me is my success story too. It's not my personally, it's the persons who I do serve. And those persons who I serve normally in Africa are not only the farmers, but the governments. Every time one government puts a policy in place, puts a governance framework in place, like the case of Zambia, the case of now Lesotho, etc., farmers from Uganda that write to me a very simple letter and say the fact that you picked me and you made me to raise schoolgirls with fish farms, that is my success story. It's not any particular. As I said, my success story is the story of the stakeholders I do serve through my institutions. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anna. I'm not sure if Dr. Bernice is already here and Professor Dr. Madalla. If they're here, they could respond to the same question. Otherwise, I would. Oh, Dr. Bernice is here. Yes, Dr. Bernice, please. You can unmute. And basically, what we're looking at is you sharing one highlight or a success story or achievement when it comes to something you've done with regards to ensuring you advocate for fish welfare. Dr. Bernice?
Okay, hi.
So
Yes. Sorry,
yes.
can you hear me? Yeah, sorry, I just had to be added as a panelist. So thanks very much for that. Yeah, I think I've been preceded by two very heavy hitters on the continent, and I think in terms of my success story, I think I still have to achieve those successes. But I'm very fortunate to be in the position that I am in, to be able to continue the work that has been laid down by Dr. Chimatiro. I think possibly one of the most exciting activities that's gaining a lot of traction at the moment, or maybe I can highlight two, is the shift from fisheries and aquaculture to blue economy, and just making sure that the voices of the fisheries and aquaculture actors are still heard within the broader field of blue economy. So that's something that we continue to push for, and then making sure that it's a sustainability drive, both in terms of ecosystem or environmental sustainability, but also social sustainability for blue economy development. So the second point that I'd like to make, and just to highlight some of the work that we're doing at the moment, is the engagement of the private sector and non-state actors within the African Union, and one particular aspect of the establishment of the African chapter of the World Aquaculture Society, which is now providing a very strong platform for multiple stakeholders to engage with on an annual basis. And I think just in terms of the One Health initiative and potential future discussions on fish welfare, this is an area that hasn't gained much traction, but I think can be a very interesting topic to start embarking on going forward. So I'll leave it there. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bernice. Dr. Nazael Madalla?
Yeah, thank you, and good afternoon to all. It's a privilege to be serving as a panelist in this seminar. Yes, in our case, and I'll talk from the perspective of Tanzania, where I'm serving. I think one of the big achievements is to be able to enshrine issues of welfare of aquaculture organisms in our regulatory framework. So in our aquaculture regulation, we have a clause which states that an aquaculture establishment owner shall maintain the minimum standards of welfare of aquaculture organisms as prescribed in the 7th schedule to these regulations, where in that schedule we have expounded on the areas which we think they are important to be taken on board with regard to welfare. So starting from the husbandry, to transportation, slaughtering, and also prevention of diseases in terms of prophylactic measures. So I think that really brings at least a framework from which now we can be able to go on the ground and start following up, and at least is ensuring that the aqua farmers comply to that. Of course, having it to the regulation is one thing, and then making sure compliance is another thing, but at least it is a small step towards achieving having an aquaculture whereby welfare aspects are well taken care of. And this, of course, reflects the trend at which the enlightened consumer community wants to make sure that the food they consume has been raised in a manner that is acceptable. So thank you. Let me end there.
Thank you so much, Dr. Madalla. So I will just go to the first question and I will direct this to Professor Sloans. You played a key role in shaping the African Union policy framework and reform strategy for fisheries and aquaculture. What lessons can we draw from that process for embedding fish welfare explicitly in continental and national policies? You're muted, Professor Sloans.
Sorry.
Thank
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we
Yeah,
can
I think
hear.
lesson that I can share with you from the continental process, 3. The first one is that we're able to put together this continental framework because we had evidence. So, for example, we started generating the research maybe around 2008-9, but the framework was only approved or endorsed in 2014. So over 4 years that we did a lot of research. So research to generate the evidence is critically important. And I think for the aquatic animal welfare, this is kind of a new field in many countries. So it would be extremely important that you undertake research to generate that evidence. Secondly, is the critical mass of experts that can speak the language. So I think over the years that we did research, we had the South-South cooperation, North-South, and really building the critical mass of people that understood the principles that underpinned the policy framework and reform strategy. So I think we did a lot of training, capacity building, but also building the future thinkers by working with students so that they learn the language and be able to acquire the skills that are required. The third one is that whatever you do must be relevant to the countries or to the stakeholders that you're working with. And this at national level, regional level. And so we had to understand how and why fisheries and aquaculture were important to the countries and to the regions, and made sure that we were able to justify for why fish was relevant to the development outcomes of those countries and regions. So those 3 are critically important as you're moving forward with the issue of aquatic and animal welfare. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Sloans. You've talked about policies and reforms, and let me take you to Dr. Anna, who is an expert in ecosystem approach to aquaculture. So you have long championed for the ecosystem approach to aquaculture, and how can this approach be used to ensure, as an entry point for policy for integrating fish welfare into the broader aquaculture and environmental strategies? You have to unmute, Dr. Anna.
Asking me to unmute.
Yes.
That is the technologies that not my generation from 35 years ago or 37, we still need to adapt. So. But let's say that building on the FAO policy frameworks, and particularly on the main pillar that is the Code of Conduct for Responsible Fisheries, the ecosystem approach to aquaculture allows the integration of fish welfare in policy and implementation, both straightforward and in a systematic way. So, for instance, when I received your invitation, my immediate thinking was, thought was, why call it from policy to practice and not from practice to policy? Because basically, into the ecosystem approach to aquaculture that delivers a scalable, adaptive governance structure which allows the integration of welfare indicators. And that goes into the current or future monitoring and policy review, new formulation, new adaptation of the policies is actually to integrate these new approaches, to integrate the welfare aspects, etc. Let me just give you two examples of the ecosystem approach to aquaculture in terms of spatial planning tools, such as zoning and carrying capacity assessments. Those facilitate the management of farms' good practices, but also facilitates ecosystem and environmental checkups and practices. By incorporating few welfare-related action triggers, like, for instance, the maximum stocking densities, dissolved oxygen thresholds, directly into the area-based management plans and licensing frameworks of this using the ecosystem-based approach, policymakers can immediately institutionalize welfare with existing systems without creating additional bureaucracy for the farmers, for the corporations, etc. And this is an important aspect, particularly for us in Africa. No duplication, no competition of many guidelines by different institutions, no bureaucracies that burns the farmer and the trader. Just do it. Go for the welfare, go for the biosafety, but do it simply and beautiful. Don't think about our own ego as experts or as institutions, but think about how through these systems, how through these NEPAD, how through these African Union policies or the blue transformation of the GSA guidelines, I can facilitate the life of a farmer. The stakeholder who wants to properly develop the sector, and that is the ecosystem approach to aquaculture that can bring together all these by incorporating those triggers of the welfare. I hope I did respond to your question, Dr. Julie.
Thank you so much, Doc. Yes, you did. And you've actually brought up something important about, farmers. And Dr. Madalla is an expert in feeds. But then when you look at feeds and nutrition, they're not only production issues, but also issues of welfare concern. So Dr. Madalla, how can research on alternative feed ingredients be translated into policy recommendations and that shape national aquaculture guidelines?
Thank you. I think often when we are researching for feeds, particularly alternative feed ingredients, we tend to concentrate more on costs and growth, and often issues related to welfare they are overlooked. And I don't know. So sometimes it's like maybe because fish they cannot talk back to us and say this feed is not as good as would want to. But so therefore, sometimes you may find that, yes, you may see some growth, but perhaps it could be leading to some chronic stress, which may eventually lead further to immunosuppression and disease. So we need to have some deliberate efforts to make sure that issues of welfare, they are also taken on board. So I think the first thing during such experiments, such research, we also need to include some metrics which will measure aspects of welfare. So, for instance, in addition to measuring growth performance, feed utilization, we can also have a metrics to measure gut health, to look maybe at fin condition, to measure stress hormone levels, and also some aspects of behavior which may be pointing towards fish not really being into the desired states of welfare. But then also the second aspect, perhaps we should, after having these ingredients, we should also have some guidelines, national guidelines, which they set not only nutritional standards, but then also welfare standards. And this in addition to prescribing the minimum and maximum levels of essential nutrients in the diet, but also we should be having prescription of maximum limits of anti-nutritional factors in feeds. So that way we can be able to ensure that these feeds, which are formulated using alternative ingredients, are not only supporting rapid growth, but they also lead to robust health and therefore welfare of the aquaculture organism. But then the other thing is to now we have to create innovation-friendly policy tools. So we need to have the national approval processes which are more friendly, and they should have some sort of incentives to take on board the welfare issues in the process of approval. And we should also come up with like welfare promoting additives, things like probiotics or immunostimulants which are available. And that can also support that. But then also supporting the pilot projects, which will inform us better on those aspects of welfare. So linking the science and practice through informed, to make us inform the decisions based on science. I beg to submit. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Madalla. So Dr. Sloans talks about reforms. Dr. Arnold talks about strategies. You're talking about innovations. And now we're going to Dr. Bernice. But Dr. Bernice, you're leading the Blue Economy Unit at AUDA-NEPAD, where wealth generation, income opportunities, and innovation are key priorities. So how can fish welfare be positioned as a core pillar of the Blue Economy agenda across Africa?
Thanks so much, Julie. It's a really interesting question, and I had to think of it before answering. So I'm going to suggest about five points that might answer your question. So I think Dr. Sloan's talked about the policy framework. So I think what we need to do is to articulate the business case for it, to anchor it into existing AU frameworks. So, for example, the Blue Economy Strategy, which prioritizes sustainable fisheries and aquaculture and healthy aquatic ecosystems. The PFRS, or the Policy Framework and Reform Strategy that Dr. Sloan spoke about, which promotes standards, traceability, and quality. And then the most recent CADEP Kampala Declaration, Africa's Agri-Food Systems Continental Program, which was adopted most recently in January this year, really elevates food safety, so linking it to that and resilient blue value chains and strong governance. So that's the first point I could say. The second one is around trying to frame welfare as more around productivity, quality, and market access. And this is particularly in light of the continental free trade area that promotes intra and interregional trade on the continent to make resilient value chains. So this really talks to better husbandry. I think the speakers have spoken about that earlier. Humane harvests, reducing stress, so like low stress handling to reduce mortalities and rejections, and improving the feed conversion rates and the quality grades that will all help to meet the sanitary and phytosanitary requirements. Now, the third one I think is an obvious one. It's adopting a One Health lens, where you're aligning the fish welfare with aquatic animal health, biosecurity, antimicrobial stewardship, and the like, to protect not only the fish welfare, but also protect livelihoods, economic development, and public health. The fourth one I'd like to suggest is linking it to climate resilience and the reduction of loss and waste. So here we're talking about welfare that is aligned with transport and harvest practices to, for example, cut heat stress and transit losses, to support cold chain efficiencies, and improve incomes for the micro, small, and medium enterprises, especially those women and youth who are involved in value addition. The fifth and last point I'd like to suggest is to, as I said at the beginning, is to make the business case, so to make it investable. So to try to embed the welfare compliance in innovative financing and procurement criteria, such as bankability, environmental and social governance, certification, and the like, and then leveraging the Africa Blue Economy strategy, innovation, and blended finance opportunities that are provided through that strategy framework. So let me end there. I hope that gives some pause for thought. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bernice. And you've mentioned Dr. Sloans, Professor Sloans, so I'll just take it back to him. Professor Sloans, given your experience with the Comprehensive Africa Agriculture Development Program and the Conference of the African Ministers of Fisheries and Aquaculture, how can fish welfare be mainstreamed into existing agricultural and blue economy policy frameworks instead of just being treated as an add-on?
Yeah, no, that's very important. I think my experience from what we went through in the processes that you mentioned is that mainstreaming is a cost and benefit issue. For example, we mainstreamed fish into the CADAP, but for us to do that, we had to understand what are the benefits that CADAP is trying to promote, and how can fish fit in there. So we did that by understanding the key outcomes of CADAP, or the indicators, which are two. First is that CADAP assists member states of African Union to ensure that the agriculture sector can grow at a minimum of 6% per year, in order for them to be able at that time to achieve the MDG number 1, which was no hunger, which currently is the same, MDG number 2. And so what we did was to make a case to say in countries where fish was very important, that 6% would not be achieved without accounting for the contribution of fisheries and aquaculture. And so that was the benefit. But the cost side of that is that if those countries were not able to define how to develop the fisheries and aquaculture in order to achieve food and nutritional security and livelihoods and welfare benefits, then they will have to buy fish or import fish from elsewhere and feed their people. So that was a cost. So what was it? Was it easier for them to manage the resources by putting in place the strategies that integrated fisheries and aquaculture in their agriculture development frameworks, or was it easier for them to go and import fish? And so that was the second issue where we now called for the Conference of African Ministers of Fisheries and Aquaculture. And we made that case to say, in your countries, fish is very important, but fish is a renewable resource. If you manage it properly by putting in place a continental strategy, then you'll be able to provide fish for your people in perpetuity, forever. But if you don't put in place measures to manage the resources and sustainably manage them, then you are going to lose this resource, which is given to you by nature or by God. And so that was the cost and benefit kind of element. So if you are going to mainstream warfare in the national policies and strategies, really you have to take it from the cost. What is it that the countries are going to benefit by integrating warfare into their aquaculture policies? Or the other side of it is, what is it going that they're going to lose? And I think we heard it from Dr. Madalla that a lot of production efficiency is going to be gained if you integrate issues of warfare. And so this is going to be a benefit. So that would be my advice, that they really need to define what would be the benefit of integrating warfare in the policies, but also if you have the capacity to be able to calculate the costs, the potential costs or the losses that might potentially be incurred by the entities that are involved in fish farming as a business, then it'd be easier to make a case for why mainstreaming welfare in the national policies. Thank you. Let me stop there.
Thank you so much, Professor Sloans. As we still talk about mainstreaming policies in aquaculture, Dr. Anna, you're working for FAO, and in your work, what governance frameworks have proven most effective in helping countries align international standards with national aquaculture policies?
I would say, no doubt, we must always mention the Code of Conduct of Responsible Fish, normally called by CCRF, the technical guidelines on the ecosystem approach to aquaculture, aka EEA. We should not forget the FAO voluntary guidelines on the governance of tenure. The FAO WHO Codex Alimentarius is very important, particularly when we are dealing with food safety regulatory frameworks at national level. Some of the international conventions are more preponderantly important, such as the Convention of Biological Diversity. The UN Framework Convention on Climate Change is extremely important, even if some want to deny it. The Ramsar Convention on Wetlands, particularly because most in Africa we are dealing with the inland fisheries, inland aquaculture, and the wetlands are important. But then we also have the Convention of the let me try to remember the name of the endangered species, the CITES. One very important for the topic, the subject of today, is the Aquatic Animal Health Code of the World Organization for Animal Health. Of course, coming from the FAO, I would say the blue transformation and the newly approved guidelines for sustainable aquaculture. Of course, at the continental level, Sloans and Bernice have mentioned the African Union policy already, so I would not dwell on that. For this topic of today, the welfare, I would also necessarily mention the Shanghai Declaration, the Global Conference on Aquaculture 20+ that took place in 2021, where that reaffirmed the FAO commitment to aquatic animal health and welfare, highlighting the imperative to reduce stress, disease risks, and environmental harm. As a follow-up, the FAO Guidelines for Sustainable Aquaculture, just approved last year by the members and endorsed, incorporates welfare alongside biosecurity, promoting best practices in husbandry and disease prevention, while at the same time calling for capacity building for the producers, but also for the regulators, which is a very important step forward. One last thing that I would not dismiss when thinking at a global level, and the policies that are framing work could help to framework this subject, is that FAO recognizes aquatic animal health as both a moral duty and a fundamental element of the sustainable aquaculture. And since 2017, FAO with partners like the NACA, WOAH, and others have advanced what is today called the Progressive Management Pathway for Aquaculture Biodiversity. This pathway, the aim is to improve aquatic animal health and welfare, among all the other key benefits. Is a risk-based framework designed to enhance aquatic health and welfare to improve the biosecurity, not only across farms and sectors, but across nations because of the transboundary issues at national and regional levels. So in broader terms, that I would say those are probably the most fundamental policies at the global level to be taken in account, and that has been taken in account at national and regional level, which in some cases have been proved the success of their stories later on. Thank you so much, Julie.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anna. And I've also got a chance to interact with the Blue Transformation document from FAO, and it's very interesting to see how much they prioritize fish health and welfare for sustainable aquaculture. Dr. Madalla, I would like to come back to you because you have the knowledge of both. You're both a researcher and a policymaker. So as a policymaker yourself, what strategies can help bridge the research policy gap, ensuring that scientific knowledge on welfare is embedded in the national aquaculture policies?
Thank you, Julie. I think the very first thing is to build a common understanding among the different actors in that space. So the researchers, policymakers, and farmers must come at a platform to be able to understand the importance of welfare issues. So at their own dimension, but then for it to happen and to be embedded into the policies, now they all have to come together. So the very first thing is to build a common understanding of the importance of welfare issues. And another thing which I see is important is the incentive for the farmers in particular to be able to adopt practices which will ensure that the animals which they are being kept, they are kept in such a way that their welfare is ensured, and that may have an element of additional costs. So for the practitioners to understand that if you have animals which are well kept in aspects of welfare, it can assure you to be able to access premium markets. That will act as an important incentive. Of course, with that understanding now, it will be playing around with the mechanics of governance. So now having them into the policies, and for instance, in Tanzania, we have gone further down to put them in our regulatory framework now to actualize it, to make it now start or get into the practice. And yeah, and after that, to be able to monitor the compliance. But I think the very key is having a platform whereby, first of all, we build that common understanding and consensus on how we move about. Otherwise, it becomes very difficult for it to be adopted even if it's part of the policy, but we want to go further, not just having it on papers, but also in practice on the ground. Yeah, I beg to submit.
Thank you so much, Dr. Madalla. You've mentioned something important about market systems and access to premium markets. And basically, one of the reasons why we do what we do at AFIWEL is because we try to ensure that we build capacities so that we can get to a point where we have ethical, safe, welfare-centered, and sustainable aquaculture. So as we talk about market systems and looking at Dr. Bernice's expertise, Dr. Bernice, in your work with AU member states and regional bodies, what entry points have you seen that could be used to embed fish welfare and fisheries, aquaculture, and the broader blue economy frameworks?
Thanks so much, Julie. Yeah, that's a very important question. I think maybe just to focus on a few entry points or policy entry points. Some of them have been alluded to previously. So the first one that I can think of is looking at aquaculture regulations and licensing. which then includes requirements on things like stocking densities and water quality, handling, transport and humane slaughter and the like. So this can be tied to license issuing and renewal and to compliance and traceability. The second one we could look at is entry points in terms of aquatic animal health provisions. To help to implement the policy framework and reform strategy, aligned measures on aspects of biosecurity, on quarantine, things like movement controls and veterinary oversight, while referencing or aligning to the World Organization on Animal Health, aquatic animal health standards. The third one is around food safety, and here we have the SPS frameworks, so integrating aspects of the welfare into fish inspection codes and the HACCP procedures, which then recognize the links between the humane practices and product quality and safety. I think one of the other ones that we could think about looking at is through the CADEP national and regional agri-food systems investment plans, which are developed by countries and regions to articulate, their main key investment priorities within their agri-food systems. And here we could try to promote the inclusion of fish welfare targets, looking at budgets and indicators within the national and regional agricultural investment plans, and then specifically look at opportunities for strengthening this. So if we could look at aspects of inspector training, slaughter compliance rates, transport mortality thresholds, and the like. The fifth one, I think we could potentially try to look at and link it to a regional perspective, is to look at regional economic community laws or model laws and harmonization. I think Dr. Sloans has had some extensive experience in this in the Southern African region with the SADC standards, where we use regional economic communities to align cross-border transport rules, the certification and enforcement for live or fresh fish trade or aquatic product trade. And then the last one speaks more to an inclusive approach to governance. So if we're looking at blue economy governance, is to try to include those officials or authorities within the veterinary fields in the national or regional economic community blue economy coordination platforms, so that welfare is brought up, it is promoted and addressed alongside other aspects such as conservation, trade, and enterprise development. So thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bernice. You've actually mentioned something very important about humane handling of fish, slaughter and transport and cross-border movement. And you've brought an aspect that I was actually going to take to Professor Sloans on the regional economic communities. And Professor Sloans, what role should the regional economic communities play in ensuring fish welfare standards are harmonized across borders and that they're backed by policy instruments? Clearly, it's a very important thing based on also what Dr. Bernice is saying.
Yeah, no, that's very important. Perhaps I would start by, just in case I know that your group, you have a lot of young people who might have just taken regional integration for granted. Maybe a bit of history. Regional integration was one of the early charters of the OAU. Remember that before African Union was African Union, it used to be called Organization of African Unity. And so in the early days of this institution, we had what was called the Lagos Plan of Action, which was part of the AU Charter. And this was actually what was the beginning of establishing that the continent needed to have building blocks through regional integration instruments. And so in 1991, they also adopted what was called the the Treaty of African Economic Community, or what was called the Abuja Treaty. So the regional economic communities are really the instruments through which the continent aims to deepen regional integration. And this regional integration aims to facilitate free movement of goods, services, and human beings. And hence you see that in some of the RECs, like in ECOWAS, they've got a common passport. Well, eventually they hope that at the continental level, they can have one common passport. So that's the history. Now, why is it important to ensure that the RECs can be used as an instrument for harmonization? It's on this basis of regional integration agenda, which is also defined clearly in the Agenda 2063. But from my experience, for you to be able to excite the RECs to adopt anything into their regional integration agenda and begin to harmonize, that element must be defined in terms of, does it make economic sense or financial sense? Because some of the regional economic communities, the focus on market access, facilitating movement of goods and services, but also human beings, as I've mentioned earlier on. And so does welfare of aquatic animals make development or business sense? So if it makes business sense, then certainly they are going to harmonize this within the trade strategies or the trade policies. If it makes human development sense, maybe from health point of view, certainly they are going to make sure that aquatic animal welfare is embedded in ensuring that human beings that are crisscrossing the national borders are not affected by some of maybe, I don't know, diseases or whatever affects the aquatic animals. So this is extremely important. It must make development and financial sense. The other one is that you must find a platform through which you can actually get the RECs to harmonize. Like I said already, that if this makes business sense, certainly they are going to look at the trade, the regional economic communities, trade policies and strategies, and so they'll put in there. And so you must really work very hard to understand. And regional economic communities, they're not harmonious, they're not uniform. They have different priorities, and they have also different challenges. And so you have to look at how best to assist or to excite these RECs to be able to harmonize the aquatic animal welfare in their existing regional strategies and policies. Let me stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Sloans. And thank you for remembering our generation and giving us the history. And as we look at that, you've mentioned, that fish welfare needs to make sense. And somehow it makes sense. I feel like we just need to put this information out in a way that actually makes sense to most people so that they understand how much sense it makes. And I want to ask Dr. Anna to help us here, because fish welfare often sits between sectors, between fisheries, aquaculture, animal welfare, and the environment. So how can policy coordination mechanisms be strengthened so that the governments don't work in silos? How do we make it make sense?
Are you calling on me because I'm older here in the room? Because Sloan just reminded us of our age. But I will take your, if you don't mind, when you think about strengthen our coordination, strengthen our relations, don't work in silos. If you don't mind, and the participants, allow me, I have a comment and an advice. And my comment and advice is that all we need is to sit down, to open our ears, to open our eyes and our heart. We should be listening, not just hearing. We should be observing, not just seeing, and we should be feeling. We should feel, not label this policy, not label my institution. Listening, observing, and feeling are three essential elements to make a real participatory governance that includes, of course, coordinated actions. Without it, no matter, and I want to say after 37 years in this business, no matter how beautifully designed the policies at national or regional or global level, or no matter what beautiful coordinated mechanisms by the African Union, by the European Union, the FAO, or whatever institutions, we will not be coordinating and therefore will not be strengthened. You see my harm, right? We will weaken as we grow older. Our bones get fragile. They don't get stronger as we think. So we need to come as one body, but to come as one body, our mindset needs to change. One main problem we lack in Africa particularly is not the lack of platforms for coordination, the absence of advice, the need for and the advice for coordination, or it's not even a matter of ignorance of the benefits anymore. Our main problem to continue in silos, to get is our belief that's my technical, my institutional knowledge, my authority is the one that should prevail. I am the authority on aquatic animal health and no one else should be touching it. I am the authority on licensing and I don't even care for the water sector. We complicate, as I said in my first answer, we complicate the bureaucracy and then we don't sit together. And what happens? Arrogance kills anything that is good. For instance, coming to this specific subject of this webinar, the implementation of biosecurity protocols requires national aquatic organisms health strategy and the associated action plans enforced by national capacities that are cost-effective, as Sloans said on the beginning, but it should be cost-effective of the risk of the different infectious agents. Therefore, regulations and standards for their enforcement should be based on international standards to meet the technical requirements requiring and concerning to biosecurity, health management, animal welfare. My question to all participants and to you, Julie, is, can this be done just by one institution? Can it be done by two institutions? No. It doesn't matter if you are the ultimate authority in the country. So, few examples for this coordination that is called upon again under the guidelines for sustainable aquaculture is the promotion of close cooperation of states and aquaculture stakeholders, including various authorities involved in the aquaculture sector, but in a transparent manner. And that close cooperation should meet the international standards, the control and manage transboundary diseases of aquatic organisms, to for instance, the rapid sharing of information of the national disease status, the new diseases outbreaks, the spread of disease of existing. Another example I would like to give from the GSA in terms of coordinating, not working in silos, is that we all And this platform is one of these instruments, one of these, what you are doing here, is to provide training for competent authorities and aquaculture workers on aquatic organism health and welfare management practices for what? To ensure not only their awareness, but to ensure that they know what are their responsibilities and their roles in the subject. What are their responsibility and roles in the new research, in promoting innovation? That is how we can break silos. As I said, for me, this webinar is from practice to policy. So I want to give you very concrete examples. And I don't think you called me to be soft and to do not say the truth. So that is the truth I want to say. We have been all arrogant. Is the FAO, is the World Bank, is the African Union policies. No, our role should be come to the farmer. Is the farmer, is the stakeholder who is important. That is what makes breaking silos. Thank you. I'm sorry if I'm very honest, straightforward. I don't have smooth language.
No,
even
thank you
though,
so much, Dr.
even though I should being an FAO, but the participants will forgive me.
No, thank you so much. And that's why we called you, because we want you to be as bold and blunt as you can be. I mean, we're learning so much out of this. And as you say, we need to shift our mindsets and work together, not just work in silos. And based from what you've said and what Dr. Sloans has said, I would like to ask Dr. Madalla, because Dr. Sloan said it has to make sense. And you've advised us that we have to shift our mindset. So, Dr. Madalla, how do we integrate welfare principles into aquaculture development strategies in a way that supports sustainability and competitiveness? How do we make it make sense, as we do from practice to policy?
I think this is where now we shift the narrative in the sense that welfare is not a cost. Rather, it's an investment in resilience and market advantage, if we consider the two aspects of sustainability and competitiveness. So we integrate these by demonstrating that what is good for the animal is good for the business and the planet. Now, if we look at the sustainability link here, when we have high welfare practices, these inherently, it means sustainability is in there. So in terms of better stocking densities, good water quality management, which eventually would reduce the pollution and the disease outbreaks. And that in turn minimizes the need for antibiotics and chemicals. And therefore you have a situation whereby you have healthy fish and a healthy environment. So that's on the sustainability aspect. But then on the competitive aspect, here with high welfare, we brand, that's where we start branding our products as high quality. So what we find that stress-free animals do produce superior products. So in terms of flesh quality, for those who are keen on the flesh, but then also a longer shelf life. So this is quite a powerful differentiator in the market. And so such kind of branding and welfare standards, it will enable the very same farmers whom they may have perceived incorporating welfare aspects into their day-to-day aspects as an additional cost, but that will give them access to premium markets and secure better prices. So this can therefore be incorporated in the national aquaculture development plans to have a particular goal towards that aspect, like leading in animal welfare. So that's, in the final analysis, it will not be a regulatory burden, but rather a strategic pillar for economic growth environmental stewardship, and the global leadership. So if we start taking those small steps, then we are going to have a very robust and vibrant aquaculture industry. And also taking into consideration that in most of our countries, we are just beginning to put building blocks for aquaculture. And I should also perhaps mention that bringing in welfare issues will be something of an uphill battle. Let's just think of how chicken are transported around. In motorcycles, they are tied in very precarious ways. So it is something which we need to start put a lot of effort in changing people's understanding, changing people's mindset that animals feel pain, animals need to live in a good environment, and maybe, but with a light touch, perhaps some of these aspects of welfare need to start with ourselves as human beings, improving the way we live, to have that comfort and things like that. And then it's also easy to see it in the animals that they also need to be kept in a manner that their welfare is assured. I beg to submit.
Thank you so much, Dr. Madalla. And like what you're saying, what's good for the fish is good for the farmer because you're going to make profits out of it. And what guides what we do at AFIWEL is that we believe that, based on the One Health concept, that healthy fish produced in a healthy environment basically means healthy food for a healthy population. So, Dr. Bernice, back to you. So AUDA-NEPAD often emphasizes showcasing learning and innovation. How can we use pilot projects or flagship initiatives to demonstrate the value of fish welfare and eventually inform policy reforms?
Thanks so much. Yeah, I think a really interesting question. And I'm just assimilating what has been said previously, especially just the previous speaker, Dr. Madalla, in terms of our self-respect as human beings and how we treat ourselves, which should then translate into how we produce our food and consume our food. So I think that's really an interesting track that we can look at going forward in terms of the messaging that we give out and the training that we give. But more specifically in terms of pilot projects, some suggestions include demonstrating again the business case, as has been spoken before, and sustainability through pilots that target humane harvest, whether it's tilapia or catfish or other priority value chains. And here we can look at developing or implementing standard operating procedures on welfare in a sort of a clustered approach or regional level. And here one could track different elements such as survival or quality grades to feed into the branding that Dr. Madalla spoke of. We could also look at publishing more policy briefs and doing publications of the cost-benefit results that Dr. Sloan spoke of, building on the point raised about the business sense to guide regulation further. Now, when we're talking about guiding regulations, this comes back to Dr. Anna's point on moving from practice to policy. So here we model the regulations from the pilots that we could look at implementing. And here it's to convert the lessons into draft clauses for licensing, for inspection or transport, and then to seek the endorsement from our regional bodies for a bit more rapid or harmonized uptake for and into the fisheries reform mechanisms. The third potential option that we could look at, and this speaks more to our mandate as AUDA, working with our partner organizations to focus on capacity building pipelines. So where we run training of trainers either for farmers or inspectors or veterinary officials or farm managers and transporters. And we could introduce simple sort of checklists or certifications for compliance around those. I'd like to just also touch on the opportunity to use some of the most recent existing work that's ongoing, where we're looking at laboratory health networks and connecting the farmers to the laboratory health networks. So here we could connect, for example, pilot farms to the regional aquatic animal health laboratories using digital reporting for early warning. We could link, for example, the welfare matrices to, for example, disease surveillance. Our sister agency, AU-NEPAD, is leading some really impactful work in collaboration with the World Organization on Animal Health to establish these regional aquatic animal health networks within a continental network laboratory. So it will be useful to further strengthen these networks, linking the labs to and authorities for diagnostics to share information and improve overall biosecurity and increase the safety of the trade. And then the last point is not so specific, but try to look at how we could incorporate these now into the broader blue economy conversation. So looking at blue value demonstration zones, where we start the conversations around bundling the welfare with the cold chains, with the marginalized stakeholders, whether it's women or youth, or the small medium enterprises, and upgrading things like digital traceability to showcase inclusive income gains. So I think we're a little bit further from that last point, but I think that's something that we can really start looking at specifically within the framework of innovation and using the fourth industrial revolution and the digital world to bring these kind of solutions closer to the food producers and the transporters and traders. So I'll leave it there. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bernice. Clearly a lot of important things to talk about there. And just as we talk about reforms, Professor Sloans, how do we balance the urgency of policy adoption with the need for evidence-based frameworks that can withstand political and institutional changes?
Yeah, I think this is a very important question. I will not talk much about the evidence. I think I already talked about evidence in the first question that I had. But maybe what I want to focus on in short is that often people that are involved in development of policies, they get frustrated because their policies are not adopted. And I think my personal experience in many countries on the continent, I don't think Africa has ever run out of policies. There are lots of policies. In fact, what you see behind me here, most of those are policies that are sitting on the shelf, nobody is implementing them. Two things that we've actually mentioned in that question. One is the policy itself is a challenge. The other one is the institutions. Now, for you to be able to develop and get a policy adopted, a policy that makes development sense, you never struggle to get it adopted. But in any case, for you to develop a policy and be able to get it adopted, you need what I call policy brokers. You know, brokers are like, if you want to buy shares on the stock exchange, you don't just go straight to the Nairobi Stock Exchange, you go through brokers. So policy brokers are very important. And that's the role which I played the time when we're developing the continental policy. Basically, as a break, I was moving around the continent in many countries and selling this idea of this new way of doing things. So you need brokers. And then secondly, you also need what I call policy entrepreneurs. These are the people that can translate the policy into concrete actions that develop, that show impact on the ground. So if you're developing a policy without thinking about these two elements, then you can have a beautiful policy, but nobody will touch it. Nobody will actually know it because you need brokers who can sell and entrepreneurs who can actually go and make money out of it, make more fish, produce more farmed fish out of it. So that's my lesson. That's in short. If you need details, sit in my class. Secondly, the other side, you need institutions. Now, institutions,
Sit in my class.
we get it wrong. Any policy, no matter how small or big it is, the fact that you have got a new policy, you need new institutions. Because, I mean, it's like they say, you're putting new wine in old jars. It doesn't work, because those institutions, they have to be able to identify with the new instrument, and they must be able to know how to implement it. So that's, in short, is that for policy to be adopted, you need one side, brokers, entrepreneurs, but on the other side, you need fresh new institutions. And so how do you develop new institutions? In the process of developing the policy, you need to understand the institutional architecture and be able to figure out how best you can now modify the old institutions so that they are built for purpose of the new policies. I hope I made sense. Maybe I confused things. Thank you. Let me stop there.
You made a lot of sense, Professor Sloans, and we will come to your class to learn more. I can see Dr. Anna wants to join that class with me as well. So, Dr. Anna, from your experience and from all that we are learning, including joining Professor Sloan's class, what are the most persuasive arguments that policymakers respond to when urged to embed sustainable fisheries and aquaculture frameworks into national policies? And how can this be applied in policy advocacy and integration of fish and aquaculture welfare?
Thank you, Julie. If you don't mind, there is one comment by Miss Lucy in the chat. If you don't mind, I wanted to fully agree with that, because she says, importance of bridging the gap between researchers, policymakers, and farmers by coming together to build understanding with consistency. That is absolutely important. I have come from a research side to a policy side to a global development side. And one of the things that sometimes we do fail as researchers, to reach the heart, to reach the brain particularly of the policymaker and of the manager, is the language. We need to translate this difficult language of science, of evidence-based, in something that is tangible. We don't need too many of the theories, too many of these citations. No, the policymaker, he needs one page. He doesn't have more than 3 minutes to listen to us in the elevator. That is the time we have between we reach the ground floor and he reaches his office. Maximum we have 3 minutes in the elevator to deliver our speech. That is the translation. And Lucy, I fully agree with you. On your specific question, what are the main persuasive arguments policymakers respond to? Let me be a little just a farmer, a person. All they want to listen is money, money, money. That is the most persuasive argument you can make for the policymaker. Money in the pocket of the farmer. That ensures 3 things: food security, livelihoods, well-being, employment. Second, money in the treasury safety box. That ensures money, resources in the Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Economy. That means the argument is economic growth of the country, GDP, but not only. The second one, socioeconomic development, infrastructure. When you start talking about infrastructure, then you go there. Better healthy and wealthy environments, particularly when it touches ecosystems, biosecurity, transboundary issues of disease, including reducing of the induced animal stress. Those are things that nowadays touch the heart of the policymakers. Talking about healthy and wealthy environments, Nowadays, because of the global politics that's going on, people avoid talking about climate change, about strategies and projects with climate change on it. Please don't. The history will prove you wrong if you don't insist in this topic. With the new going on, people avoid talking about the gender issues. Please don't. Those are important for aquaculture because if we forget these elements, I said very simple, but touches the pocket of the farmer, touches the money in the treasury safety box, starts the social economic development and the wealthy environments, then you don't have a good, consistent program for development of the sector. And believe me, even if the policymaker at certain point doubts you, then when he sits back in his office, when he sits, he starts thinking about that and he connects with the global agendas. Even if he has at some point he has doubts, when he starts thinking about the global agendas, when he starts thinking about from where he can get the money, believe me, practitioners, please don't forget those topics. Thank you so much, Julie.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anna. Clearly, the policymakers understand the language of money. And Dr. Madalla, you're one of the policymakers. From your perspective, what policy incentives could encourage farmers and hatcheries to adopt welfare-oriented and safe practices at scale?
Thank you. I think this is it's an important aspect. Is we always talk of carrot and stick, and often we tend to concentrate more on the stick than the carrot side. So with the incentives, we want to have a much bigger carrot and a very short stick. So we usually incentives are more effective than penalties in driving a widespread and genuine adoption of all these welfare aspects. And here we need to have a mix of financial, technical, and market-based tools, but in a very clever way. And depending, of course, with the country contexts, so these need to be adopted. When we look at financial incentives, for instance, there could be some tax credits, particularly on some equipments which they would enhance welfare of animals. So what if we talk of aerators? What if we talk of those probes to measure different water quality parameters, be it even be it simple or automated? And then also there is also an aspect of slaughter. So what if we have a tax incentive on equipment which would ensure humane slaughter of fish? I was just reading an article of late, and it shows like fish tend to suffer excruciating pain for like 10 minutes before they die, which is not a very good thing. But another aspect could be on financial, could be something to do with the preferential loans and grants, if it's possible. If we can be able to link up with financial institutions that when a farmer meets a certain criteria, then this one will be assured of a very good market and therefore can be given a particular a credit line with maybe a 0% less interest or 1% less interest, such kind of incentive. The other one, the second incentive is the market-based incentive. And here it could be something to give preferential treatment when it comes to procurement of products. Maybe this could be with the public institutions, that public institutions being told you procure fish from farms which are practicing or have mechanisms for ensuring fish welfare, if it's practical. But then the other thing is with the certification, because welfare usually would be driving towards having access to the certification institutions, the Aquaculture Stewardship Council and the like. So there could be an element of subsidizing the costs of those third-party welfare certification organizations, so that now the farmers can be those who are practicing, who have fish welfare mechanisms in place, so they can be able to access the premium markets. Of course, the other aspects, the other incentive is in terms of knowledge and technical incentives, and here we should have enhanced extension services, being able to change the mindsets, being able to spread the word about welfare issues among the farmers. And the other one is if we can be able to have some farms as demo farms showing the whole setup of welfare and the kind of benefits which they can be achieved if the farmers adopt the package of welfare interventions in the farm. So I think those ones they can help, and the aim here is to make that each farmer be able to see the rational choice of going of adopting the welfare principles in their farms. I beg to submit.
Thank you so much, Dr. Madalla. Okay, Dr. Anna wants to add something before she leaves. She has a hospital appointment, so I only have one last question for Dr. Bernice, but we could give Dr. Anna a chance to respond before she leaves. And also with that regard, Dr. Anna, there's also a question for you from Dr. Edwin Muga. Any ideas of how many national aquaculture or related policies across the continent have been incorporated the ecosystem approach to aquaculture as an issue for interventions to ensue?
I would say that the highest topics integrated, particularly on the policies being drafted, not the old ones, being drafted in the 2000 years, they incorporated the environmental ecosystem approach to aquaculture, EAA. Some of the old policies have been reviewed and they also incorporated those elements. The matter is not of incorporating. The matter is, are they being practices? Are they being implemented? As Sloans have said, all those policies on his back, they sit on the tables. And sometimes it's our fault as the drafters of those policies. We don't make it practical. We don't make it a 5-page policy. We make it a 500 pages policy. No one wants to read that. No one has this. But more than 80% is already being incorporated. I do apologize, Dr. Julian. Bernice, my dear, I do apologize. I need to leave. I will just stay for your answer and then I will leave, okay?
Yes, that is fine.
I will still be for Bernice. Thank you.
Not a problem, thank you. Dr. Bernice, back to you. We have the aspect of the carrot and the stick. We believe you have the carrot and we have the stick. So from your perspective, how can continental actors like AUDA-NEPAD support national governments in harmonizing policies so that fish welfare does not lag behind other blue economy priorities?
Okay, thanks so much. And I'll try to speak as fast as possible so I don't delay Dr. Anna further, but thanks very much for staying. Okay, so I think not talking about carrots and sticks, and focusing more around the collaboration, the point that Dr. Anna spoke about earlier is not working in silos, etc. So what we found works quite well, and I'll refer again to the platform that's being established in the aquaculture sector. An annual event that happens that brings partners together and stakeholders together, and really convenes a multi-stakeholder discussion platform. I think that approach works quite well. So I would like to suggest sort of convening coordination platforms that can either stimulate or progress dialogue on this specific issue. And also then sustain AU agency collaboration with other stakeholders, whether it's the private sector or development partners or targeted partners like WOA and FAO and other partners. This can really help to showcase innovation from the continent. It can help to highlight African positions and align efforts with international standards and private sector investment interests and buying requirements. The second point potentially is to look at integrating this into the CADEP delivery, so where we link animal welfare commitments and budget lines to the most recent, to the Kampala strategy intervention, strategic intervention that highlights aquatic production and ecosystems. And use those policy brokers and institutions that Dr. Sloan spoke of to make sure that these are taken up at the regional and national level and implemented into the policy frameworks. The third potential way we could try to help is to help to strengthen or develop AU fish welfare guidelines or market-based tools. And here Dr. Madalla spoke about market-based tools and incentives. So, for example, looking at certification and conformity, innovations and approaches. So I think under the Blue Economy strategy and the policy framework and reform strategy, to make specific efforts to reference WOA standards on transport and mortalities and so on, and include those practical SOPs, the checklists, KPIs that then the regions, the RECs, can adapt into model laws. And then these can be included also into the voluntary sustainability standards like the Ecomark Africa Eco Label, to really try to drive the demand side from the consumer's perspective for humanely or responsibly produced products. We could also try to look at scaling capacity and inspection systems. I've mentioned this before. So look at establishing curricula or inspector academies or centers of excellence, strengthening the laboratories and the networks that I spoke about earlier, and the data systems that can then capture the welfare indices alongside animal health and food safety indices. And then perhaps lastly, to strengthen the monitoring and evaluation and transparency. Whether it's developing or adopting a dashboard of indicators of some sort, looking at specific welfare indices that can then be taken up on a voluntary basis to drive national and regional efforts and peer learning as we go along. So I hope I spoke quickly enough. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bernice, for the insights. I'm sure you really tried to speak very fast, but we got the insights. Thank you so much. Dr. Anna, I know you're leaving, so if you had one message to leave the African policymakers after this webinar with, what would that be?
First and foremost, think about the farmer, think about the actor. That is our mission. That is the spirit of public service, to develop the aquaculture sector. Thank you. I hope I'm not being so simplist, but I don't like to preach just my profession. I like to preach what is my beliefs and my living as a person, as a professional, but foremost as a Christian. And that is what I do, is to share and to serve before I get served. Thank you very much for inviting me, Julie, and to all of you who have been so patient, listen to me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anna, for making time. Considering that you're not feeling well, but you still made time to the webinar, we're really grateful at AfriWell.
Thank you.
Get well soon, and we hope to see you in our next webinar.
I will, absolutely. I enjoy it. Thank you so much. Thank you. Colleagues, you excuse me, please.
Thank you so much. As Dr. Anna leaves us, I will go back to Professor Sloans. So, Professor Sloans, how do we ensure that fish welfare integration in policies is not only achieved, but also implemented? You have a whole bunch of books behind you, and that's all policy. So how do we ensure that this is implemented?
Yeah, I think I've already mentioned in the last question that often policies don't get implemented because you don't have institutions, requisite institutions. So I think we really need to ensure that we build institutions that are going to push and implement those policies. And I think the other element is, which I also mentioned earlier on, of evidence. And I think this is where, in many countries in Africa, we make a mistake. We don't have people that have the skills. Like I said, critical mass. They don't have the knowledge. So we design policies based on knowledge which maybe we read elsewhere or what is happening somewhere else as equivalents. But we don't have our own indigenous capacity to be able to do these things. So, and I think this is where our centers of learning universities are very critical. I think we need to ensure that for every policy that we try and promote, there must be a process of institutionalizing those policies in the knowledge systems. And I think this is from our own experience. I mean, the time we're developing the policy framework and reform strategy, we worked a lot with universities. Some of the universities, we actually helped them to set up policy analysis departments so that they begin to understand how to develop policies. So knowledge is extremely important. The critical mass is extremely important. And then on the other side, we have the institutions that can help us to institutionalize those policies. And of course, in between, already mentioned about the policy brokers and the entrepreneurs. So I think we have, three parts. On the left, you need knowledge, generate knowledge, have the capacity to speak the language. And then on the far right, you have the institutions. But in between, you need to have the policy brokers and the entrepreneurs. So I think that would be my prescription. At least if we get that right, then we'll be able to. But often, also don't get disappointed because policies to be adopted, it's not a kind of a quick fix. You need things to be done over a long period of time, people to gain confidence, particularly for policymakers to see how what is the impact of those policies. And I think in the case of aquatic animal warfare, really this must be reflected in the performance of the fish on the farm. So I think that would be evidence enough to nudge policymakers to say, yes, this makes sense. Yeah, I think let me stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Sloans. So there's a question from Professor Joseph Matunguru from Lake Edwards and Albert Fisheries and Aquaculture Organization. He says, I appreciate and congratulate all the discussions related to the main topic. However, I have some concerns for which I would like to get the view of the panel below. It is fundamental to integrate aquaculture and fisheries in holistic approach as they seem to affect other sectors such as the environment, road infrastructure, transport, health, and environment, etc. But the key challenges remain the cost, because to develop all these sectors for sustainable aquaculture, we need to mobilize much funds. Another question remains into the cost benefit of aquaculture for the welfare at the small scales, fish farmers that is, who encounter several difficulties to fund their fish farms in terms of feed, equipment, and biosecurity. So how could governments and other international partners handle these two challenges to ensure the sustainability of aquaculture to promote food security and economic growth? I will direct this question to Dr. Madalla.
I'll try. I was a bit away now. Yeah, let me have a quick recap of the question. Yes,
So the question, yes.
Yes, I see the questions. How could the governments and other international partners handle these two challenges to ensure sustainability of aquaculture, to promote food security and economic growth? Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, I think for small scale farmers, and this is something which I wanted to say, that one good thing with Africa, we are just at the beginning of building the industry. So if we begin well, these welfare issues are not really like rocket science. Ensuring that the fish have access to good quality water it is a must, and it is just one of the best management practices for fish farming, because with good water quality, for instance, the fish will be able to utilize the feed better, they'll be able to grow better, they'll not be suffering from diseases or parasite infestation. So I think one aspect is to be able to build these in our programs which you are promoting aquaculture to be part and parcel. So we need to send the right kind of message to the farmers. Stocking densities. I remember some ways back you had these unscrupulous aquaculture extension consultants, sending wrong messages about stocking densities. So people were overstocking and not getting the kind of results which we expect. So I think first and foremost, let's have this in the basic foundation blocks of building the industry. Obviously, other aspects like the roads and everything, they go a bit beyond the farmer, and this now is where the government needs to intervene, because a road will not only save a fish farmer, will also save other crop producers, livestock producers. So these are at a high level. But if we can try in our own way, in our own small way, to ensure that we send the right kind of message from the very beginning, I believe the welfare issues will eventually fall in line as we move along. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Madalla. Dr. Bernice, this question goes to you from us. What is the role of, programs? Let's say, what role should continental programs like AFIWEL, for instance, play in supporting governments to draft, adopt, and integrate, and possibly implement fish welfare into existing sustainable aquaculture or blue economy policies?
Okay, I'll give you the wish list that I think you could play, with the proviso that you collaborate and work with others to achieve this. So the first is to continue what you're doing. I think these kind of webinars and information sharing dialogues are very important, and we get not only the perspectives of industry hard hitters like the panel, excluding myself, who've been speaking here today and giving the history lessons and so on. extremely valuable to have those perspectives based on experience and based on what has happened on the continent, and then to get the feedback from the participants who just to say thank you for being so engaged and for asking the questions, because it really provides a stimulating engagement and gives us as policymakers, things to think about and a pause to reflect on. So in addition to that, look at doing things like, standards translation, where you could produce the internationally aligned standard operation procedure pacts, looking at handling and transport and humane harvest, and checklists that are tailored to specific production systems, and maintain an open repository. Information on the continent, there is a lot and a lot more being developed and produced, but to have it in one space and to have it accessible is really important. We're going back to the issue of clusters, or the opportunity of clusters is to run cluster pilots, and publish the cost benefit and compliance results to make that business case that's been spoken of throughout this, and then convert those lessons into model regulatory texts for RECs and member states. When we're talking about capacity development, capacity strengthening, and laboratories, to try to help with the resource mobilization around the training of trainers for inspectors and vets and so on, and helping the decision makers to the countries to plug into the aquatic animal health networks for diagnostics and surveillance. So yeah, I think then just to continue to work with the partners, with the organizations, bring us together to have the conversations, and keep that convening function going on to keep us on our toes in responding to these kind of issues, and not just responding, but actually putting them into the mechanisms that support implementation, rather than just discussing the issues. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bernice. And actually, just based on what you've said with regards to standards, Charles Ekpale had asked, can we get a standard welfare policy so that inspectors would evaluate and recommend for certification and rewards? So I feel like by your response, he's already been answered. And Professor Sloans, Lloyd says, I really like Professor Sloan's articulation about policy development and the need to have adoptable and implementable policies. Prof, how can we improve the presence or availability of policy brokers and policy entrepreneurs before we add to the pile of policy documents behind you? The pile, I guess, that's what I wanted to say.
Well, I think the simple. I mean, for example, if you want really a policy to be understood, in a country, you need to have people that not everybody is going to understand the policy, maybe in the ministry of responsible for fisheries, but there could be one or two people that that will be able to understand. For example, if you want to go and do this aquatic animal welfare in the United Republic of Tanzania, then you have your policy broker, who is Dr. Madalla. So he is going to help you to sell this to the minister, to the PS, but also to the farmers. So I think that's just an example. But if you just pop into the country and you start preaching, you think you're convinced this is the best thing to do, then often you might find that, of course, I know that sometimes also this is a problem that is caused by development projects. You have a project, and that project has got deliverables, including developing a policy and getting it adopted. Often you find that you've done one part, but the policy hasn't been adopted because you ignored the brokers. So I think I would give you that example, that if you want the ministry responsible for fisheries in the United Republic of Tanzania to adopt this, then you first have to have a chat with Dr. Madalla, and then he would advise you on how best to get this to the desk of the authorities. So that's a practical example of a broker. For example, I mean, we've been talking about how animal welfare can enhance productivity on a farm. Then certainly your farmers are going to be part of the ecosystem of the policy entrepreneurs, because they are going to understand that if they are going to adopt this and make use of it, then they are going to reduce stress and be able to improve productivity of their farm. So, and there will be the people that will go to Dr. Madalla and say, hey, why don't we rewrite our aquaculture policy to ensure that we have welfare elements into it? So that's practically what you would do. Does it make sense?
Yes, Prof, it does make sense. Thank you so much. So we have a lot of questions, but we're also running out of time. So basically what we usually do in times like this is we take all the questions and we'll send them to the panelists and request them to respond to them. And once we get the feedback, we'll share it with all the attendees of the webinar. We'll also share the report and the recording of this webinar to all their participants, so that if you missed out on anything, then you can still get it when you look at the recording, including the panelists. So this comes to the end of our webinar. I would like to say thank you to our panelists for making time to be part of this, and to our participants for taking time to attend this webinar. As always, we always have one webinar at the end, the last Thursday of the month. And our next webinar would be, are we doing enough? Advancing fish health and welfare for sustainable aquaculture through One Health. And the question, the tagline is bridging the health welfare nexus from disease prevention to ethical care in aquaculture. So join our network and you'll get a lot of information there with regards to what's coming in terms of the webinars. Otherwise, aside from that, I'll just like to say thank you so much, Dr. Bernice. Thank you, Dr. Madalla. Thank you, Professor Sloans. Always a pleasure working with you.
Thank you.
And I look forward to seeing you in our next webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
so much.
Baba.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Asante.
Bye.
Thank you.